Welcome back to Soundwaves Unplugged. I'm your host, Aaron Ross. Last time we were on the show, we discussed the Black Sabbath farewell concert and this epic moment of triumph saying farewell to Black Sabbath for their last concert ever. And today, unfortunately, we must announce the passing of their lead, Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne passed away earlier today, as many of you may already know. And, one of the reasons why I wanted to do an episode on the farewell tour, the farewell concert, and Black Sabbath and Ozzy and everything that was going on with that is, if you've followed Ozzy at all, if you're familiar with his life and everything since, the show and kind of more recent stuff, then you know that he's, had a very public health struggle, over the last however many years. And, the writing was on the wall that Ozzy was nearing the end. And there's something very poetic about, how he willed himself to live. It feels like willed himself to live for this final hurrah, for this final show in his hometown, back home where it all started, for the final farewell. And now here we are just a few weeks later, and he has gone on to another realm to rock in places unknown. I've seen a lot of the comments and people are saying, reunited with Randy Rhoads and RIP legend. And, it's cool to see how many people are pouring out and just, paying their respects and paying their tributes. And I think one of the most important things is something we touched on the last episode, that the reason why Ozzy Osbourne is so important, the reason why Black Sabbath is so important to the history of music, is because they created a new sound, right? They invented a genre. They're the godfathers of heavy metal. And think about all the bands that you may or may not have grown up with, but everything from super hardcore, like Slayer in the 90s, even a band like Meshuggah, all the way out to something more mainstream friendly like Nirvana. You can make the legitimate argument that all of these bands are downstream of what Black Sabbath did. Different from what Led Zeppelin was doing. Different from the Jimi Hendrixes of the world, right? It was different. It was dark. It was macabre. It was horrific in its own way, but it was always introspective. And I want you to go back and listen to those early Sabbath albums before the split, right? And listen to the lyrics. It's more questioning than it is declaring, right? And a lot of it is anti-war. A lot of it is, and that's kind of the genius of Ozzy, right? So here we are remembering a legend in this whole music war that we fight every day. And I want to share a personal story of why I care. Way back in 2007, when I was a kid in high school, I got to see Ozzy Osbourne live at Madison Square Garden. Shout out to my old friend, Keenan McCarthy. He got the tickets either for Christmas or for his birthday. All I remember is it was around Christmas time. It was December 22nd, 2007 at Madison Square Garden. And Rob Zombie was opening for Ozzy Osbourne. And at the time, I've been studying music my whole life. You know, I was a piano player. I had done programs at Juilliard and programs at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And I think, you know, a couple years prior, I had my own musical rebellion where I had already rebelled against the classical music to do the jazz music. And now I'm rebelling against the jazz music to get into blues and rock and roll. And I was very heavy into Jimi Hendrix at the time and just really starting to explore rock and roll. And then, you know, me being a piano player originally, still, but originally, and teaching myself guitar in 8th grade, I had set off on this whole new journey. And because I was such a studious, dedicated piano player, I approached guitar in the same way, and I wanted to be the best and the greatest. And what's more greater, right? I know it's not syntactically correct, but what's greater um, than shred? What's greater than metal? What's greater than the technical precision that it takes to be able to play these crazy riffs and these crazy solos, right? And so, like, from my Jimi Hendrix era, and I'm still always and will forever be a Jimi Hendrix fan, I went into the darker realms, right? And I grew up in a house where we listened to P-Funk. I grew up in a house where we listened to Parliament, and my dad would show me Funkadelic records, right? We listened to Maggot Brain, and we listened to some of the most legendary guitar stuff ever, because I guess he realized, like, I guess, you know, he's serious about playing guitar. I might as well show him something from my generation that I look up to. So, long story short, by the time 2007 rolls around, I'm fully invested in a heavier sound. I think at this point, I had already discovered Pantera, and I had already discovered like Ozzy as a solo artist, you know? And I had a lot of friends at the time that were very much metalheads. I mean, we were listening to thrash metal, like shout out Trivium, big Trivium fans. I was even getting into like a little bit of Avenged Sevenfold. Anything where like the guitars were super technical, the solos were crazy. I used to steal Guitar World magazines from fucking Best Buy when I was a kid, and I used to sit in the aisle at not Best Buy. What was it called? Barnes and Noble. I used to go to Barnes and Noble on my way home from school. I used to go to the magazine section, take a Guitar World magazine, and I used to sit in the aisles with a notebook and a piece of paper, and I used to transcribe all the guitar lessons that were in the Guitar World magazines. And if you remember the days when Guitar World magazine was life, if that was ever a thing for you, um, those were always like these really cool, it was always short lessons. It was like a lick or a riff or like some kind of technical exercise from some level legendary guitar player or someone who's really hot at the time, right? And I used to sit in there and I used to like write all this stuff down. And I became like a huge fan of Dimebag Darrell and Zakk Wylde, right? And Zakk Wylde, for those of you who don't know, has been a guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne for a long, 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 long time, right? Um, and so by the time 2007 comes around, I'm fully dedicated. I'm like this all day, every day. Let's go, and I'll never forget that concert. It was incredible. Rob Zombie opened up. He's like such a crazy cinematic type of energy. His set opened up with this like crazy cinematic visual compilation with like pieces from some of his films all compiled together. It's like crazy. And then he gets on stage, he does his thing. He's like performing on top of like a man-made cliff in the middle of the stage, and there's like a monster that runs across the stage halfway through. It was absolutely epic and incredible. I remember Rob Zombie because he had one of the best songs on the Matrix soundtrack. All right, I don't know if you remember Dragula, but like that scene where that song is playing, A1, the song, the energy, everything, it just fits, right? And to me, that was a moment. I was always a huge Matrix fan. My whole household watched The Matrix multiple times when it came out. And when the DVDs came out, we watched it as a family. We studied it. So that was epic for me, right? And then the stage goes dark, pieces get moved around, right? Everyone's waiting in anticipation. And I'll never forget how hilariously Ozzy Osbourne, the intro to his set was. At the time, The Office was a very popular show, right? And in his video intro on the big mega screens all throughout Madison Square Garden, right? At one point, it's him on the set of The Office, like in the office, right? And he's running around like a madman. And at one point, he just stops and he just squats and takes a shit right in the middle of the floor. And then he runs off. And like the cast of The Office is like, what? And then it just pans back to like a poop on the floor with like crushed up toilet paper or whatever. I guess he wiped, right? I guess the Ozman still had the courtesy to wipe, even though he was shitting on the floor in the office. It was hilarious. And for a kid at that time, that was like the most entertaining thing I'd ever seen. And then the music started to play. And then Ozzy got on that stage and he was absolutely a true showman, a true epic performer. They did well over an hour. At least that's what it felt like to me. I wasn't keeping score at the time. Zakk Wylde did a 10-minute guitar solo. And I remember watching YouTube videos of these legendary like 10-minute Zakk Wylde guitar solos and being such a aspirational kid, I used to like think like, well, how would I design like my crazy guitar solo? Like I gotta do 10 minutes of just like straight up shred and like I'm gonna tell a story. And he did the whole thing. He got the crowd involved and everything. And they did all the hits. I heard everything from Crazy Train, My Mom Coming Home, everything. And I will never forget that epic December night in 2007 where Ozzy blessed the garden with just the wildest, most amazing performance. And it was a real show. Every single member of the band was top notch, and Ozzy, incredible. I mean, he sounded like the album, and by this point, this is like relatively older Ozzy, because this is 2007. He quit Black Sabbath in 1978. How many artists do you know that like quit their bands in 78, went solo, and then in 2007, damn near 30 years later, are still killing Madison Square Garden like it's nobody's business. So that is all just to say, thank you, Ozzy. And, life is one of those things, right? It starts, it goes, and it ends, right? And so we'll all eventually see you on the other side. And it was a wild ride, and we had a lot of fun. And I loved that you were able to come back, bring the band together in your hometown one more time right before the very end. And I feel like, in retrospect, it feels like he knew. He knew that this is the window. If I don't do it before this time, I'm not going to be able to do it. And he did it. And once it was done, it's like that sigh of relief. And in that, he's gone on. And all we can do is just go listen to his music. Listen to Black Sabbath's early records and appreciate the artistry, the raw talent, the grit, the lyricism, and just how much they put into every single record. and you know how much Ozzy really like poured his soul out for the world, you know. So this is like a story time version of Soundwaves Unplugged, where I'm talking and we're not doing the usual thing, and we'll get back to regular scheduled programming very soon. Don't worry about that. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you're subscribed, we really appreciate you. And if you're not doing nothing tonight, go put on, Blizzard of Oz, or go put on Paranoid, or the original Black Sabbath album. Go put on something, and take the time to listen to some really good music and appreciate the moment that we all got to share together for all these years. Thank you so much. Stay unplugged.